Hello, believers, non-believers, and everyone in between. You're listening to Stories with Sapphire. I am Sapphire Sandalo. Now get cozy and open your mind because it's story time.
Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Vibe Stream. This is the live stream that I do every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Instead of reading your emails, I read from my library. And so we are making our way through this book. It is called More Bones, Scary Stories from Around the World. And the music you're listening to right now was written by my husband. I asked him to make a spooky version of Lo-Fi chill. What is it? Lo-Fi beats to chill to? Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking my settings here. All right, if at any point you can't hear me, let me know. All right, so the last two stories from here were kind of bangers. So I recommend this book. This book's pretty cool. I don't know what year this was. All right, so this is called The Shaggy Gray Arm. This is from Iceland. Should I read this way? Yeah. John's parents didn't want him to go to magic school. They had heard that some students changed in strange and mysterious ways, and some disappeared without a trace. But John was determined. How else can I chase away ghosts and demons? He asked. How can I overcome bullies? I must learn to write magic signs and symbols so I can protect us. The truth was that his parents didn't want him to go to any school at all. In those days, most people in Iceland believed that reading and writing were dangerous. Someone might use the knowledge for evil purposes. Even clergymen were suspect. But bit by bit, John convinced his parents that magic could be useful. Didn't they want to see the invisible little people who lived in the rocks and hillocks around their farm? The ones who slipped into the house each night to eat the food left for them on the table? Besides, John promised he would be a good magician. He said he would never dig up a body in a graveyard and skin the lower half to make a pair of magic pants. Who wants the coins that appear in corpse breeches? He asked. Not me. He said he would undo evil curses that dried up a cow's milk or left a baby crying all day. So his parents finally relented. They waved goodbye to their son with tears in their eyes. Who knew what the future held? Would they ever see him again? John walked for hours. When he finally arrived at magic school, he saw smoke belching from a nearby volcano. He knocked on the school's iron door. A shaggy gray hand poked a hole through the thick iron, reached out to turn the handle, and beckoned to John to come inside. The door groaned open. John looked, but he saw no one there. No shaggy gray body belonged to the shaggy gray arm. John did see a spiral staircase leading deep into the earth, and just as he took the first step downward, the door clanged shut behind him. John realized the hole in the iron door had mysteriously closed, leaving him in inky darkness. He inched his way down, feeling for the edge of each step with his toe. Maybe the stairway seemed endless because he was moving so slowly, or maybe it really did descend to the very bowels of the earth. With each step, he grew warmer as he neared the underground cauldrons of volcanoes. Finally, he saw a faint glow ahead. It was coming through the doorway at the bottom of the stairs. When he entered the cavernous room, the only light he saw was from the fiery letters and books that students held in their hands. No sunlight pierced the darkness of their study hall. No teacher lectured to the class. A boy named Magnus welcomed him, but most kept reading. John knew they couldn't spare a moment from their studies. He remembered what a storyteller had said about the magic in the skin-covered books and how hard it was to learn. 7 years, the storyteller had said. That's how long it takes to master everything spelled out in fiery letters. John realized he would have to work hard to catch up with the rest of the class. He had arrived weeks late because it took so long to convince his parents to let him go to magic school. Suddenly, every head snapped up. It was time to eat. The shaggy gray arm that John had seen at the iron door now shoved itself through the rock wall of the classroom. It handed each student a platter of fish along with milk in a cup made from a ram's horn. John wondered why the students were listening so intently. He saw the arm withdraw and heard a muffled shriek just before the wall slammed shut. Who was back there? Another student? A shaggy servant? Some students whispered to one another. Some anxiously thumbed through their books looking for protective spells. But others seemed to grow more menacing. After they finished eating, all quickly returned to their studies. How do I get a book? John wondered aloud. He didn't have to wait for long. The shaggy gray arm thrust through the cave wall and dropped the first magic book on his desk. When the arm withdrew, it left a whiff of sulfur behind. John snorted to get the stench out of his nose. Then he began with the easiest spells because he was learning to read and write at the same time. Magnus answered all of John's questions, much to the annoyance of some other students. They wanted to concentrate in perfect silence. Somehow, the fiery letters lit up words in John's mind. When he finally headed to his room, totally exhausted, the same fiery letters lit his way along the corridor as eerily as a candle. Before he fell asleep, he saw the dim back of a student outside his door. He didn't know which one, but just as Magnus walked past, he saw the student wave his hands and mutter something. In a puff of smoke, Magnus disappeared, and a slippery slug crept up the wall. John was horrified, but he sneaked into the corridor as soon as he could and put the slug safely on his closet shelf. From then on, he was wary of his classmates. Whom could he trust? Year after year, John studied until he was one of the most talented magicians at the school. He finally learned how to turn the slug back into Magnus, and he shared the knowledge that Magnus had missed while making slimy trails in the closet. John could cause another student's baked fish to swim right off the plate. He could turn a ram's horn cup into a wildly budding ram. He knew how to ward off ghosts and demons and how to put special signs inside his shoes to overcome a bully. He learned demonic spells and curses too, but he stored them in the deepest recesses of his mind, never to be used unless he was in extreme danger. After 7 years, John and his classmates were about to return to the upper world. All but one, that is. A terrible rumor was being whispered about. Some student was going to disappear without a trace. John hadn't believed what his parents had said so long ago, but now Magnus was saying the same thing, and Magnus knew exactly how it would happen. We'll go up the stairs single file, he said, and everyone will be allowed into the upper world except for the last one in line. The shaggy gray arm will grab him and carry him down to the deepest, darkest depths where he will be a slave forever. John knew he couldn't outdo that demonic gray arm with magic, but he was the leader of his class. He had to do something, so he made a plan. I'll leave last, John told his classmates. Some sneered at him for being such a fool. Magnus thanked him. On the last day, John and his classmates began the long climb up the dark stairs. The shaggy gray arm was holding the iron door open at the top. One by one, his classmates exited into the first sunlight they had seen in 7 years. When John reached the door, he saw the shaggy arm reaching for him. I'm not the last, John shouted. See the one behind me? John leaped out the door while the shaggy arm seized John's shadow instead. When the arm realized what it had done, it rang that iron door like a monstrous cymbal, clanging its fury all the way to the center of the earth. John was free. He was almost dancing down the path. Then he saw a demonic grin on Magnus's face. Do you realize that whatever that gray arm takes, it never gives back? John stared at the ground where his shadow should be. And do you realize, Magnus asked, what troubles you'll have with no shadow? Everyone will think you're a demon. They will run away, screaming. John suddenly noticed that Magnus had no shadow either. Welcome to my world, said Magnus, shaking John's hand. His grip was excruciatingly painful. John looked down in horror. Creeping down Magnus's arm was a wave of shaggy gray fur. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little confused with that one. So if anyone was following and wants to explain, I got a little lost. So the arm was him the whole time. I don't know, man. My eyes are very dry. Ay. All right, I think we have time for one more. Are we all confused about it? All right. This one's called The Prince's Fate, and this is from Egypt. The king and queen of Egypt, my mouth is dry. The king and queen of Egypt could hardly believe it. Was their baby boy to die some frightful death? That's what the Hathor said, the 7 goddesses who could see into the future. Your son shall die by serpent, crocodile, or dog, they decreed. Then they left the palace without another word. The queen wept, and the king paced the floor. Would a poisonous serpent bite their son when he was a baby? Or would a crocodile from the mighty Nile River devour him when he was still a child? Or would he grow to manhood only to have a dog tear him from limb to limb? How could they protect their son? We must build a strong house for him far out in the desert, said the king, and never let him venture outside its walls. They supplied the young prince with the finest foods. He grew strong on melons, figs, dates, fish, and fowl, and special bread made with fruit and honey for the royal family. The finest teachers taught him how to read hieroglyphics, the picture language that was inscribed on papyrus paper and in the great pyramids and tombs. He learned various board games, and he was given clay balls for playing catch. Servants anointed his body with precious perfumes and oils, and they clothed him in the finest white linen. The king and queen thought their son had everything he could desire. They even sent dancers, musicians, and acrobats to entertain him. But the prince was lonely. He climbed the stairs to the flat roof of his home and looked out across the desert. What lay beyond that vast expanse of sand? And what was that animal he saw running and jumping and playing with the hunter passing by? The prince raced downstairs and asked one of his servants, the inspector of horns and hooves and feathers. That's a dog, the servant replied. Tell my father I must have one, said the prince. The servant turned pale. He knew what the goddesses had decreed. A dog? The servant cried. Yes, a dog! The prince ordered the servant to race to the king's palace that very day. The king had never said no to the prince, no matter what his son desired, but he didn't expect him to ask for a dog. What if the very puppy he gave the prince grew up to be the dog the Hathors had warned against? Tell my son he can't have one, he told the servant. But the prince didn't stop asking. Every day he sent messages to his father, and each time the king visited, the boy told him, I want a dog. The poor king didn't know what to do. Finally, he decided he must tell the prince what the goddesses had foretold. For a moment, the prince was silent. He knew full well how dangerous serpents and crocodiles could be, but a furry little dog? He'll be my friend, the prince told his father. I'll raise him myself. So the king finally relented. He couldn't stand to disappoint his son. He ordered his servants to find the friendliest, tail-wagging puppy in all of Egypt. The prince named his puppy Brave One, a fine name for a royal dog. Night and day they were together, even when the prince was studying. The puppy chewed up the prince's sandals and nipped at his toes, but the prince had never been happier. Still, he longed to see the world beyond his desert home. He grew to manhood and could no longer stand being cooped up in a house in the middle of the desert. When he saw his father, he cried out, Let me be free. Let my fate unfold. The king and queen feared for their son's safety, but they knew it was time for him to find a wife. So they let him set forth into the world, his dog by his side. Always wear this, said the queen, and she gave her son an amulet, a piece of magical jewelry. It might protect thee. but she turned her face aside so the prince would not see the fear in her eyes. When had the Hathors ever been wrong? The prince rode his horse northward, followed by his loyal dog. He had been told that the chief of Naha-Irana had a lovely daughter kept in a house with 70 windows, which reached 70 cubits into the sky. The prince looked up from the tip of his middle finger to his elbow, the length of a single cubit, and he tried to imagine how high 70 cubits must be. For the chief had decreed that anyone who wished to marry his daughter must scale the wall all the way up to her topmost window. Many princes had fallen and died. By the time the prince reached the princess's home, his muscles were strengthened by the long journey. His hopes were high. Besides, he surely would not fall to his death. That was not a fate the Hathors had decreed. So he climbed without fear, never looking down. And when he reached the princess's window, she clasped his hand and pulled him into her room. The prince was delighted to see that she was friendly, spirited, and every bit as lovely as everyone had said. The princess was equally pleased with the young man and agreed to marry him, even when he told her what the Hathors had said, that a deadly serpent or crocodile or dog was lying in wait for him. "Let thy dog be killed," she begged. He would not hear of it. "Brave one is my friend." So the princess vowed to study magic spells to protect her prince. Soon after the wedding, the princess awoke one night when Brave One growled. She wondered if she had been right about the dog after all. But as she lay quietly beside the prince, she heard a slithering sound. In the faint light of an oil lamp, she could see a serpent, a poisonous cobra. It came closer and closer. She held the dog back and began to recite an old spell, declaring that she herself was Horus, the mighty god. "Rise, venom, then fall to earth. Horus spits upon thee. Thou art weak and blind. Thy head droops, for I am Horus, the great magician." Then she pulled out her dagger and chopped the serpent to bits. The prince awoke and was amazed at what she had done. "Behold," she said, "the gods have given one of thy dooms into thy hands." The prince gave praise. The princess not only learned spells, she acquired a magic wand made from a curved hippopotamus tusk. On its surface were carved animals, symbols, and demons that she could call upon in time of trouble. Soon the prince and princess traveled back to Egypt, where the prince took daily swims in the Nile. The princess and Brave One stood on the bank watching. One day a crocodile surfaced behind the prince. It opened its great jaws, ready to clamp its vicious teeth on his foot, but Brave One barked, warning him. The prince swam quickly toward the riverbank, with the crocodile snapping its jaws behind him. The princess shook her magic wand at it. She called upon the gods for help. "Get thee back, beast of waters. Do not show thy face to Osiris. Ra shall close thy mouth. Thoth shall cut out thy tongue." The prince splashed ashore and raced up the riverbank, and the crocodile sank beneath the murky waters. That very afternoon, the princess fashioned small crocodiles out of wax. She stabbed them with thorns, spat upon them, trampled them, and threw them in the fire to assure the death of any crocodile that lay in wait for her prince. Dozens of the menacing crocodiles sank to the bottom of the Nile that day, never to arise. The crocodiles didn't manage to eat him, but the prince was sure that the Hathor's prophecy would come true, somehow, someday. So he embraced life while it lasted. One morning, he and Brave One hunted foxes in the desert. The prince shot an arrow, but missed. Brave One chased the fox behind a huge rock lying at the base of a cliff. The prince followed. All he saw was the dog's tail disappearing down the foxhole. He called and called, but Brave One didn't come back. So the prince dug with his hands, throwing sand aside to make the hole bigger. He squirmed his way in and found that he was in a low passageway, lined with crumbling mud bricks. Suddenly, the bricks gave way beneath him and he tumbled to the bottom of a long shaft. Very little light filtered down from the hole above. But when the prince's eyes adjusted, he could see that he was in an underground tomb with paintings and hieroglyphics on the wall. He picked himself up from the pile of mummified cats that had broken his fall. He was merely bruised, but he was horrified to see that he had smashed some of the sacred mummies. It was hot and humid in the tomb. A swarm of fleas began to bite him. He was brushing sandflies and gnats out of his eyes when he heard Brave One bark far above him. The dog was leaning over the edge of the hole, peering down into the gloom. "Go home," the prince commanded. "Go home." He hoped that everyone would begin searching if the dog showed up without him. But Brave One was too loyal to leave his master. He tumbled down the shaft to join him. The prince caught him but staggered backward. As he did, he stepped on a trap designed for tomb robbers, a slab of stone delicately balanced over an even deeper hole. Both the prince and Brave One went crashing through. A vile-smelling, powdery dust swirled up around them, and while he lay at the bottom, gasping for air, the prince saw more hieroglyphics on the wall. The faint light made it hard to see, but he slowly read aloud, "Death shall come to him who damages this tomb." He could breathe no more. The Hathors were right. It was a dog, a brave and loyal dog, that brought about the prince's doom. Oh my god! I don't like that one. I don't like that it didn't. I thought it was gonna be like a weirder twist, but let me catch up. Oh my gosh! Hi MM, my cousin from the Philippines is in the chat. All right, cool. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining me. I live stream every Wednesday and Thursday. So if you'll join me at Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific, I'll read your emails and stories. And every Thursday, I read from my library at 4 p.m. Pacific. All right, everyone. Last bubble, where did I clock? No! Actually, it's already broken, so it used to work. I think I got it at, wait, where was it? Here? I got it years and years ago from Urban Outfitters. I don't think they sell it anymore, but I'm sure if you just Google melting clock, you'll find it. All right. Oh, Adam Lombardo, thanks for the super chat. Even Tikwi Doll was upset. Yeah. She's good. All right, bye.